Hello everyone, this is Jimmy and welcome to episode 23 of Celestial Journey. Today we're going to make the automated Essentia farm. I guess is a decent name for it. But first let's talk about the problem, make sure we're all on the same page. The problem we're having is that right now when I want to go do a recipe, I don't know ahead of time if I have enough Essentia in the ME system for it. Say I want to make a witch's oven, right? It takes Machina, Ignis, Praecantio. I have to come here and check, do I have enough, Machina, Ignis, and Praecantio? Answer turns out to be yes. Most of the time, the answer will be yes. However, if you go to craft something, and you don't have enough, say I didn't have any Permutatio in the system and I want to craft this would stall on the altar, and the longer it stalls, the more unstable it becomes, and eventually something bad will happen. The first couple bad things will get absorbed by our stabilizers, but if you, the player, doesn't notice it to go fix it, eventually something very bad will happen, like one of the items will get destroyed. And at that point, it'll never recover on its own, right? You have to either fix it yourself or abort the infusion and try it again later. So the solution to that is to set up a system that will always have a minimum of certain, a minimum number of each Essentia in the system, and if it doesn't have enough, to request more get made somehow. So given that, there are now a couple limitations we have to work around. First of all, the biggest one is that there's no level emitter, right? I've mentioned this a few times. There's no level emitter for Essentia, only fluids and items, which means we can't have the AE system just tell us, hey, hey Jimmy, you have 31,000 Ignis, maybe you can tone it down a little, Instead, we need another way of measuring that. The solution to that will be storing them in jar form. So warded jars, when full, hold exactly 250, and then we can just count the number of full jars we have. That's simple in theory. However, that means we need a lot more stuff to be able to, detect when jars are full. Fill jars, empty jars, yada yada yada. Another limitation is that the jar can either be in storage, that is, we can see it, as in item form in our ME system, or it can be on the ground placed. If this were a Essentia storage bus, we could put the jar here and then see it in the Essentia terminal, but not both. So a side effect is because we're storing them in jars, we actually can't look at the Essentia terminal to get a good sense of how much Essentia we have. So if we have say we have 10 full jars of Potentia, 9 of them will be in the ME system, right? And only 1 will be here. I don't want to put it here because the import bus will actually empty it. So if we look in the Essentia terminal, it'll only display as a single jar, or as like 250 Potentia. Another thing is, because we're storing all of our stuff in jars, we can't use any digital storage. Anything we store in digital storage, we'll never see, again. So at some point, we can kind of just disconnect the drive. But for now, I still need the digital storage until we get it set up. I think the easiest way to envision this system is as a 3-part system. So first, you have your jar fillers. That is, you have for every aspect. So for all 40 odd aspects, you have one of these setups, right? A smeltery, some number of slurry pumps, alembics, however you wish to configure your smeltery, that melts down items and stores them into empty warded jars. Then you pipe items in, much like this, except you can control it with Redstone now by counting your jars. If I have less than, X jars of this element, turn on the item conduit. And, for certain materials, X can be bigger or smaller, right? For Potentia, you probably want more on tap. For, what's one you probably don't use much of? Humanus, you probably don't need quite as much Essentia on tap, so you can be like, if I have 5 jars of it, I can turn it off. The second part of the system will be a jar storage system. And for the purposes of this setup, let's see, do I have any on me? I don't. We'll be storing them in block placers, or there's, when it comes to placing jars in world, especially filled jars, it's pretty or both placing and breaking filled jars, there's a lot of weird bugs with various mods. Like the open block placer works fine, but there's some block placers or block breakers that'll like void the jar or duplicate the jar, and we're gonna, we kind of have to work around what block placers and block breakers actually work as intended. But anyways, the second part again is our jar storage. That's what's actually connected to our main ME system, because it has to be able to count the jars. Right, the first part, the jar filler, can actually be on its own subnet and will be on its own subnet because it'll use something like 300 channels. Because we need, a channel for each import bus. Basically, each element will use like 6 channels or something. So we want it on its own subnet. Well, we don't need it on its own subnet, but it'll be easier to design as such. Anyways, I haven't built it yet, so we can't see it. But the second one, the second part, as I said, will be jar storage, and the third part will be jar emptying. And by jar emptying, what I mean is we will on the main system have a set of Essentia storage buses. Let's see if I have any. I haven't crafted all the components for this yet, so that'll be a challenge for me. But we'll have a set of Essentia storage buses, and for each element, we'll have one jar in front of the storage bus. When this jar gets empty, so say we're using Potentia for some reason, and once it empties, we'll need a system that automatically detects that, picks it up, and puts a new full jar there. Right, so there's our empty jar. We'll need the good news is comparators can measure the fullness of these, so it's pretty easy to say, put a comparator here, a NOT gate, loop the redstone signal back to some type of block breaker. When the jar gets empty, then we break it, put a full jar in its place, and again, we see now that the jar is full, the comparator lights up. And now our ME system will always see some amount of, in this case, Potentia in the system. So let's get crafting. Before I get started though, let me warn you, this is going to take a lot of stuff. We're going to need about 50, let's call it 40. 40 Essentia smelteries. If we put 2 slurry pumps on each, that'll be 80 slurry pumps and 120 alembics. And that's before accounting for stuff like import buses and stuff. But let's just count the number of alchemical constructs we need. So 40 smelteries take 40. This doesn't take anything of particular note. Well, it takes 2 dark steel blocks each. Okay, let's count dark steel blocks and well, the only reason I'm counting alchemical constructs is 4 dark stone blocks. So let's count dark steel blocks because we're going to need a lot of dark steel. All right, so smelteries. 40 of these, so we need 40 alchemical constructs. We're at 160 dark steel blocks already. But we also need 40 of these, so we need another 80. 240 dark steel blocks for the Essentia smeltery. Slurry pumps. We said 80 of these, so that's 80 alchemical constructs times 4, 320. 240 plus 325, 560 dark steel blocks. And these, 2 dark steel blocks each, and we needed 120 of them. 240 plus, what was that, like 560? 560 plus 240, 900 dark steel blocks. Thankfully, because we've had robust automation going for this the whole time, you can see we have 13,000 dark steel in the bank. Just give me 1,000. Do it. And, our alloy smelters will gradually replenish this. Remember, that dark steel was, being produced from, episode 3 or something when we started making it. We've been making dark steel for a long time, and we're using up a lot of it now. And in practice, it's actually a lot more dark steel than that. Each alchemical construct takes a catalyst, which takes another 4 dark steel blocks. So we're probably in the vicinity of 1,500 dark steel blocks. Good news is I still have enough, if only by a small margin. But make sure before you try to tackle this, make sure your dark steel production is very robust. Another thing is that these sunny bases use a lot of weak blood shards, so you also need to make sure either you have a farm for these, because I think they can be dropped, but I actually don't know if they can be dropped by fake player kills, because you have to kill them with that weapon, and I don't know if a fake player can bind to it, because they also need LP in their life network to use it. Anyways, I just have an imbued slate, our blood magic system here. In fact, I've already crafted these, so I've used up most of my imbued slates, but yeah, we have 23 stacks, and I just used, probably about 50 stacks of imbued slates on weak blood shards. So again, it's important that your infrastructure is up to snuff before you try to tackle a big problem. So crafting all of these components probably took like 100,000 V. I ended up, let's see, let's head back over. Remember that magical forest that I did some crafting in last episode? Well, I've since expanded it. I still have this crafting table here. I did a lot of lag spikes today, but I added another crafting table here, which got blown up by a creeper once, and another crafting table here, which hasn't been blown up by a creeper yet, and another crafting table out here. So I have 4 crafting tables. Basically, each crafting table can absorb the V in a 3x3 area, 3x3 chunk, right? So I have 4 crafting tables out here, and then I also added a 3rd crafting table in my base here. So yeah, I'm just flying all over the place, taking the V out of everywhere to craft all these components. But finally, we're ready to begin actually building. So let's start with the first part of the build, I guess, the Essentia, smelteries. So as I said, we're going to have 40 of these. Well, I should count the actual number of aspects, but 1 per aspect. And I think the setup I'm going to go for is obviously 1 smeltery, 2 slurry pumps, and 3 alembics. I'm going to leave the other side empty. With a 3rd slurry pump, I've noticed that it's slightly faster at turning like this purple stuff into essence, or into what's the word? I always forget. Essentia. It's a little faster at turning the purple stuff into Essentia than it is at melting it. If I put one of the bellows there, it's a little faster at melting into purple stuff than it is at turning purple into Essentia. And if you put a vent there, you put a little bit less flux in the air. Flux, I think, is the least of our concerns because of how powerful the flux scrubber ritual is, and the fact that we can just, run more of them. So I think it's really your choice between putting a 3rd slurry pump, a 2nd, putting a 3rd slurry pump, a bellows, or nothing. And for now, I'm going to go with nothing because I think I can't craft any more alembics and slurry pumps is really what it comes down to. I'm depleted. Actually, my main chunk here has mostly recovered because I previously put a bunch of VIS batteries here, or V batteries. These cover like 4 chunks, and they go from here all the way down to bedrock, and each one holds 10 V. So when I craft, they restore my my V here, and then when I'm not crafting, they slowly refill, but it's very slow. I've set up a small portion of this system. I have 6 smelteries for the 6 basic aspects. I don't know what they're called. Basically the tier 1 vis crystals, or the tier 1 vis that are not composed of anything. So that's air, Terra, Ignis, Aqua, Ordo, and Perdito. For those 6, they each have a smeltery. I put a 7th one on accident, but they're labeled with just item frames, which unfortunately they don't actually tell you in the tooltip what they are. Maybe I'll try to find a better label that does. I think if I like a drawer, I think does tell you if you lock the drawer. But anyways, for each one behind it, its storage bus is partitioned to match its aspect. So the Perdito one has the Perdito storage bus behind it. Now, because the items we're melting will not all be pure aspects, they do have to all the storage buses have to be connected. But to demonstrate, I think, how this works, I'm going to start with a pure aspect, so dirt. Dirt is pure Terra, so if I put it in here, also I'm supplying the Essentia with, the fuel as being aluminium. For now, I just have a long-standing crafting task producing aluminium, but eventually I'll replace this with something that's dedicated to just always crafting aluminium. Anyways, we should see that as it gets melted down, it gets placed into here. When that fills up, wondering, do I need? No, I think once these import buses warm up, they're faster than this thing smelts them. Anyways, we missed it. But what happened there was, whoops, I think I have my threshold wrong. 1 second. So I have these set to 14. I think maybe they should be set to 15. So let's take this jar out real quick. See what happens when that fills all the way up. I think actually my dirt ran out. Also, my inventory is a disaster right now because I have so much stuff. And I'm just going to store that jar like that. And Yeah, my inventory is a disaster right now because I'm working and I have like all kinds of components in here. Anyways, when this jar fills up, we should see it fill all the way up to 250, not just 236 or whatever, and it should get picked up by the block breaker. So let's test to make sure that works. There we go. So I have a comparator. So I guess if this potentiometer is on 15, it'll be easier to use a block of redstone. 1 second. There we go. So input red. So when the jar gets completely full, it emits emits a comparator signal of 15. Then if 15 is greater than or equal to 15, which it is, it'll let the signal through and activate the mechanical miner, which is on pulse mode, which stores it in there. So then if I get a bit more dirt in here, we can see that when a second jar fills up, it should stack with this. These storage buses I'll eventually connect to our main ME system. This is how we'll basically count the number of jars we have. When these storage buses are set to extract only, at some point I'll partition them, and they're also set to extremely high priority. Basically, we never want to extract the jars from here unless, we never want our main AE system to extract the jars from here unless there's literally nowhere else to get jars from. In practice, unless I go and, by hand go to a terminal and say, give me filled jars, that should never be relevant. So anyways, now we have 2 filled jars of Terra in here. So, this is how we're going to store and count our filled jars. So for this one, which I think is air, my plan is to use feathers. Unfortunately, feathers are not pure. They have some Volatus in here, right? So if I put feathers in here now, because I haven't set up the Volatus one yet, the Volatus will have nowhere to go. But I hope that kind of explains the gist of it. So I'm going to really quick go and swap out all those potentiometers for redstone blocks, just so it's easier to understand. And then to demonstrate the last part of the system, the emptying part, we have full jars stored in our miner here. Now, if we want, we could add a buffer inventory between the miner and the third part here, if for whatever reason we need to store more than 9 stacks of jars, but I don't think that's really necessary. I mean, how often, will you ever need to store more than 9 times 64? That's like 550, 560-ish full jars. I expect not. Anyways, from the miner, which again stores the full jars, we have a import bus and a formation plane on its own mini subnet. So basically it says, the formation plane tries to place the item if it can, and it places the warded jars here. Next, we'll want to put a Essentia storage bus on this jar and connect it to our main network. So to do that, let's see, we'll need to disconnect that. And this rail here, I currently have connected to our main network. So let's connect it like so. I need another. Right now I'm just using the quartz fiber as a cable anchor. You can also paint your cables if you don't want them to connect. I've never painted a cable in my life, and I don't intend to start now. So, anyways, now this worded jar, we can actually see the contents of it from our main ME network. Whoopsies, why did that blink out? No, it didn't blink out, never mind. Device online. So let's say, just for demonstration's sake, pretend we're doing a infusion. Oh, right, I should talk about this first. This comparator measures how full the jar is. We not that signal. So basically, if this ever turns off with a signal of 0, then the NOT gate will turn on and power a miner on pulse mode, which will pick up what is hopefully an empty jar. So, say we're doing an infusion, we're using this Terra, still using the Terra, lagging a little bit, continue to use Terra, and then once we use the last 10 points of it, we should see this picks up an empty jar, and this places a new jar there, and then the infusion can continue on. So even though in our ME network it might look like we don't have 250, or we don't have more than 250 of any aspect stored, we actually have it stored in item form, just waiting to be placed as soon as we empty the jars. So I'm going to go ahead and, since I don't need 25 vials of Terra, I can come here and click it into this one. I suppose whoops, something disconnect. I can't click that in. Ignore that sound. I think I have a hard drive that's acting up. My inventory is a total disaster. Give me the dirt. Alright, so that'll fill the jar up to its top and then place a new one. And then place a new one. At which point I can empty the rest of my vials into it. Alright. Anyways, so I'm gonna basically have to duplicate this setup for every single aspect. Wish me luck. Well, it's been 5 seconds for you and 4 hours for me, and I have 48 setups here. Now, there aren't 48 aspects. In fact, they stop here. So how many are unused? 1, 2, plus 8. So there's 38 total aspects. The last 10 are there, if a mod gets added, like I don't know, some magic mod that adds new aspects. Likely we won't ever end up using them, but they're there because I was doing them in rolls of 16 and I just finished the last row. So every single aspect has one smeltery dedicated to it, and it's eventually tied into a warded jar. Some of the worst parts, let's see. Well, the worst part was really just building it. Like every single piece had to be placed by hand because they're almost every piece of this build is an entity, so there was no copy pasting allowed. But yeah, now if I just, in theory, I haven't tested it yet, can grab any item, doesn't matter which, throw it into any smelter, doesn't matter which, and since I'm doing gravel, we should check the Terra and Perdito ones. So Terra is filling up, and Perdito a couple down. Which one is Perdito? This one is distinctly not filling. Uh-oh. My worst fear is that I have to configure, that I configured some storage buses wrong. So each of these is configured with an element to match their, to match the, the aspect that's lined up with it. But oh no, here it is. Okay, it was probably just taking a second before it got picked up. So yeah, Perdito is going to the right one. Now, all I have left to do is send items into them. So we should see now that the full Terra jars are showing up in here. And the well, hold on. So this jar doesn't count because it's not full. But those 4 full jars are now, we can view them, they're stored in here and we can view them in the AE system. Now, I think I'm going to try to go ahead and fill up 1 or 2 of each jar just so I can go and lock these drawers. Or not those drawers. This storage bus. So that we don't, I have these set to... Gosh, I really need to restart my game too, so it stops lagging. To extract only, but I think I still want them partitioned just to make sure we don't end up with junk filling this up somehow, some way. On second thought, I decided I'll configure our item in IO first, because finishing, or as part of the process of doing so, will inevitably fill up jars of various types. Part of the reason I want to do that is because if I can set this storage bus, right now I have it on extract only high priority. If I can set it to input output, then if I take a filled canister out through the terminal for whatever reason, when I put it back, it'll go into this miner here. So we can effectively use this miner as storage. At least I think we can put items into it. I hope we can. That way the miner can serve as, bi-directional storage. Anyways, what's up here? Why are you not filling it up the rest of the way? So here I'm processing for air essentia. I'm processing feathers. Feathers have two aspects. For most things we do, we'll end up with more than one. Unfortunately, there's only certain aspects have easily accessible pure items. So, anyways, that's why when it's processing, sometimes it'll end up processing air, sometimes it'll process Volatus. So now that we have one item in here, I can come click the oopsies, that's not the partition button. Partition, and once it's partitioned, I can switch it to bidirectional. Cool. So now that we have jars of air, I can grab one warded jar, come here to this level emitter, and configure it and say, I want to emit while we have less than, I don't know, 10. For air, something we need a lot of, I'll set to 50, I guess. So what we should observe is, you know what, I'll for demonstration purposes, I'll set it lower. Let's set it to, we have 2, so I'll set it to 3. When the third jar fills up, we should see that this level emitter turns off, which this item conduit is extract on redstone signal only, so that should also turn off, which after this processes the 62 that are in here, this should also turn off. So we are, I'm going to wait until this jar is just about full. All right, this jar is getting filled up. Almost there. 250, so it fills up, gets stored in here. Now we have 3. That turns this off as expected, which should result in no more feathers being placed in here. Now this will continue to process all that it already has, but it'll never. Well, it'll continue processing all it has, which may or may not fill up additional jars. Usually it will, which means that we won't immediately. We won't immediately turn the system back on as soon as we use the first jar. Now, why is that quartz fiber there? That shouldn't be there. There we go. And now because for some reason I had a quartz fiber blocking that. Now we have this formation plane can place the jar there. This storage bus is connected to our main AE network. So now we have this air essentia available on our main system. So I'm going to have to go and configure this for every single one of these 38 essentia types. I almost forgot that our essentia smelteries give off a fair amount of flux. So before I continue this too far, I should make sure to put my flux scrubbing ritual in all these chunks because they're already getting pretty corrupted. In fact, they're already off. I was about to say I'm going to force these. Oh, no, they're on. I'm going to force these off until I have a chance to put the flux scrubber in so I don't accidentally spawn rifts over here. Thankfully, this ritual only takes like 17 stones each and doesn't take much LP to run because I'm going to have to put a lot of them up. Basically, every chunk needs its own. Maybe I can get away with just letting the flux flow from one chunk to the next, but I really don't want to risk spawning rifts here, and because we're like right in our base, right? Rifts here is very, very bad. So yeah, I think I'm going to err on the side of caution and place more rituals than I may possibly need. But that's still going to end up being like, I don't know, 20-ish of these things. But 3 down, 17 to go. Alright, all of our flux scrubbing rituals are up, and we can see still have plenty of LP to go around. For most aspects, I can just directly shove the item in here. Like for this, I think I have coal for fire, or for Ignis rather. So since I just have plenty of coal in my AE system, I can just directly shove coal in. However, for some items take a little bit of processing. So water bottles, for example, contain Aqua, and my plan, or my intention for this is that I supply glass from the AE system, and then I craft it into water bottles, and then fill the water bottles, and lastly put the water bottles in here to be melted. This process, unfortunately, is a little slower than I would like because water bottles don't stack. So after it burns out, there's a little bit of downtime, but I think that'll be fine. In practice, we'll end up getting some Aqua from other sources too. I'm also seeing, where is that? Oh, I think that tooltip is telling me the aspects that are in the item frame. It's kind of funny, I guess. But anyways, by doing so, I can avoid the use of, it's all to avoid the use of the dastardly crafting card. Alright, we're back once again, and I now have all of these configured. So for each aspect, I have a interface providing either the material directly or raw ingredients to make the material, and then a level emitter measuring the number of full water jars we have, which are stored in here. And if it's above a threshold, most of them I just have set to 10. I'm sure I can tune these thresholds as I go, but above a threshold, it turns off the export. So looks like everything in this first row here is done. I'm looking for a light that is on. And there's a few near the end. Actually, I'm not sure if I've set all these conditions yet. So there's a little bit more configuring I have to do. Anyways, what I've been doing is for each one, I have to set the jar, set the threshold, put the jar back, make sure this is configured. But anyways, we can see we don't yet have 10 jars of soul, so we are continuing to export gold, which contains most items I'm exporting contain better ratio of soul, of material. Like soul is only 1/5 of a gold ingot, but for some aspects, there's just no wonderful, no great sources of. If we look here for Humanus, this is another rough one. Human skull, or not human skull, zombie head, 1/3. Again, we're only at 3 jars, so this is, I haven't configured this yet. Good thing I'm checking these, otherwise this would run until effectively I run out of zombie skulls. So yeah, that's the gist of it. This has taken a ridiculous amount of work, but the good news is now it's done and I almost don't have to worry about it anymore. There's a couple little things left I have to do. First of all, I have to make sure there's I have to automate the aluminium that goes in here. Right now I'm just I'm manually requesting large batches of it and putting it in here. This system doesn't use aluminium very quickly. Like one piece of it burns for quite a long time. However, it does, it does use it up over time. And we can see our Ignis one here actually just turned on because I am using Ignis to make aluminium in the background. So I suppose, we have exactly 10 here. So for a while, this turned on, sent a little bit of coal here, which will fill up a 10th, maybe even an 11th jar. Cool. The other thing we have left to do is to automatically supply the system with warded jars. So right now I'm just crafting a bunch by hand. Because these are made in the arcane crafting table, we can't fully automate this process, at least not until whatever modular machine that's being implemented for it is actually fully implemented. And then I'm just manually putting them into this interface as well. This interface is hooked up to one of the subnets. I would try to explain this, but you know what? How about instead of me trying to explain what I built here, I'll post one of the pictures that Epic Ninja Crafter sent me when he was describing the build. I think it's much neater because he actually colors his subnets, and it'll make so much more sense than me trying to explain this monstrosity that I've built. And there's still a little bit of cleanup left to do. Like my used warded jars, I can, take them out of these mechanical miners and put them back, send them back into the interface for reuse, among other things. But I think I'm running out of time. I want to get this video, done so I can actually post it today. So why don't I wrap up here? I'll do the little cleanup stuff off camera between episodes or something. Again, huge shout out to Epic Ninja Crafter for this, the idea and the documentation he provided me. It really helped. It made the building process faster, and this entire thing took 6 or 7 hours in spite of that. So I can't imagine how long it would have taken if I had to start from scratch. And I think I'm right about at the point of having 1,000 subscribers. So, maybe if you make this worth my while, and this video can be our 1,000 subscribers special, the monstrosity that I've built. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.